Hello, and welcome to the last round of Gothtober sprints on my channel. There will still be one more over on Hannah's during the weekend, but yes, we are here this Thursday to read books and chill. We were just talking about how we've all had eventful weeks. We're ready to chill. We have some guests here. If you've been around this month, you'll already have seen them. You will already have met them, but do you want to introduce yourselves one more time?
Sure. So hi everyone, I'm Kara. My channel is Wild Book Garden. I have been here before, so you've probably already heard this, but I read pretty much everything, all kinds of genres, age ranges. That's really important to me. I actually just recently celebrated my 5-year anniversary on BookTube, which is wild to me. I can't believe it's been that long, but yeah, excited to just hang out.
I've also been here before. I'm Lizzie from Lizzie as Elf, and I don't think I've ever said what I'm into reading, but I read pretty much everything, but I'm really into fantasy and horror. Even though I'm an absolute wimp, I'm really enjoying like horror books, and like gothic horror is like my main horror book that I enjoy, and anything that's like an actual ghost story. So yeah, and any age range as well. Like I love a middle grade, always have, always will. Yeah, and I like YA too, and yeah, read what you want, but I love it also.
Yeah.
Okay. And believe it or not, I have also been here before. and I really like reading a bit of everything, every age audience, except for true crime. That's the one genre I will definitely not read. So that is my reading taste. But yes.
Yeah, I think I've read one true crime book, and that was because I had to borrow from a friend's bookshelf, and at the time I was living with a non-booktuber and like a not real like big reader. So she had very small shelves, and like she was really into true crime, and I was like, right, well, okay, I'm gonna dip my toe in then.
Yeah.
And it was super interesting. It was about like one of the asylums that got shut down, and it was about that, like the running of that, which had like, you know, psychopaths and all that sort of stuff in there. And so that was really interesting, but like it's not a genre I would choose to pick up either.
Yeah, same. Like the only thing I could maybe see myself reading is something like that where it's like there's like a not historical focus, but you know what I mean? It's like doing something for a reason, or like there's that one about the Osage murders, and how that led to like the creation of the FBI because all of these Native Americans were being killed for like oil, of course, and stuff. So like that kind of thing I might read, but like yeah, the regular true crime, it's just it doesn't interest me, and it also kind of creeps me out a little bit, like the fact that it is a genre. So like I know a lot of people like it, so like no shade if you read it. It feels weird to me personally.
Same. The only time I read a true crime was when I had to for uni, and it was the most, I think it's the least I've wanted to read something that was on my degree, because I just felt uncomfortable to the act of reading it, and it just it didn't feel like me. So that was, yeah, not my favorite reading experience.
Hi.
Sorry.
No, it's all
fine.
Disgusting behavior, Gem, honestly. Not like you have a life or anything.
I'm so sorry. Please forgive me.
No, we're just getting started, and we were discussing true crime again and how we struggle with it. But also, yeah, hi, welcome. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, yeah. I'm Gem from Bookish Gems. I read horror and other stuff. Manga, fantasy, but mostly horror, let's be honest, at the minute.
Love some good horror.
Oh, yeah.
Hello. You're reading one of the great Gothic satire Austens. Even though I don't really consume much true crime, I feel like I know about Ted Bundy just because of news and everything that happened around it.
Yeah, that's like the kind of thing we were talking about where it's like general nonfiction, but about crime. like I feel like that's what Eric Larson likes to write. So I might read some of his at some point.
And I feel like I want to read The Five, and I
Yeah,
think
which
it
is
might
kind of like the opposite of that, you know? It's like
Mhm.
talking about the victims more than like glorifying the drama, you know?
Yeah. So hopefully that will be a good one. Hello. I hope you enjoy reading Nevernight. I think I saw on your Twitter updates, Lizzie, that did you like the second one? Because I see you're reading the third one.
No, I didn't like the second one. Like, the only reason I got through that book was because it was an audio. And then I was like, well, I own the third one, and it's also on script. So yeah, I'm gonna be a completionist and complete the series. Good news is I'm enjoying Dark Dawn hell of a lot more than I did God's Grave. But interestingly, if I'd read God's Grave as soon as I'd finished Nevernight, I think I would have enjoyed it more. Because I remember Nevernight, I've kind of put it on a pedestal because it's an assassin school and it was fucking great. But then I kind of didn't read God's Grave for like a year. So I'd kind of like had this great memory, and then God's Grave was like completely different. So I was like, I don't like it.
To
So
be
I should
fair,
get sooner rather than later is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
The longer I leave it, the less I'm gonna like it. Okay.
From
not
my experience.
Busy, so I'll do my best, but I can't promise anything.
It's just my experience. Other
did read
people
it.
might agree.
I did read it directly afterwards, and I DNF'd God's Grave and just left the
Ooh.
series with Nevernight. But other people love the series.
The thing about Nevernight and the thing about Mia as the main character is I forget that she's supposed to be a teenager, right?
Mm.
And teenagers are really, really dumb a lot of the time. Do I want to read about dumb teenagers all the time? Absolutely not. And there's this whole plot thread that is really glaringly obvious, and I'm always like, how did you think this would be a surprise to anyone?
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say what the plot point is because Jem hasn't read the second or the third one.
I did not see that coming.
But like, I'm reading the third one, and the third one is absolutely like it's back to what I liked in Nevernight, which is good.
That's good.
And I'm sure you'll be fine, Frida. Like, I'm just one person. Like, there's people who gave God's Grave 5 stars. I just wasn't one of them. I gave it 3 stars.
Yeah.
It's not too bad.
Which is fine. Like,
Every
the
time I-
thing is, it was fine. There was nothing like
Yeah.
terrible about it. I just didn't love it. So I was like, I'm not going to give it below 3 stars because, like, I can't, like, I wouldn't not recommend Nevernight as a series.
Mm.
But I was just like, but this isn't what I wanted for a follow-up. So that's why I got 3 stars. Like, if it had, like, it could have got 5 stars if it hit the nail on the head what I was looking for a follow-up. But it still got 3 stars. It was fine. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah. Every time I review like a really loved book that I didn't like, it's like I feel like I always end it with like, but everyone else loves it. Don't listen to me. Bye. Like, don't let me steal you. Yeah.
That was a struggle. I feel like this is a good time to segue into what will we be reading? I see everybody's reading Northanger Abbey, so now I want to read that.
I know, it's a good one.
But yeah, do you want to say what you'll be reading? Go around. If you want to start, Cara.
Sure. So I actually am doing really well on my prompts. So this book does not officially count for anything, but that's okay because I only have one left. But I'm going to be reading Godmersham Park by Jill Hornby, which is a historical fiction book that's like inspired by the governess of like one of the brothers in Jane Austen's family. It's really interesting so far, and it's reading very quickly, and I'll have a review for this going up in a few days, so I obviously am going to be finishing it before then. Yeah, super interesting. I'm really liking it. There's a lot about like the role of a governess in this time period and how it was like this weird, like you're not one of the family, but you're also not really a servant, so basically nobody likes you. But it's really funny. Like the writing is really like clever and enjoyable. And I also might be doing some like a couple of like things for work. So I've been told that my like concentration face looks really angry. So if I look mad, that I'm just focusing. So that's my plan.
I basically I'm an idiot. And I thought I had to finish Ordinary Monsters by Sunday. I don't. I have to finish Ordinary Monsters by the last Sunday of the month in November. I do, however, have to start and finish City of Brass. That's what I was supposed to be reading this month. And I totally got my months mixed up. So I'm really dumb. This also wasn't on my TBR either. And I'm doing really bad with Gothtober, but it's okay. We just pretend that that's not a thing. And my Gothtober prompts will be my November TBR because I've done a crap reading month. But I have to read this. I know nothing about this apart from everyone loves this series, and that scares me immediately because I'm always that person who's like, but if it's hyped, I'm not gonna like it. So, but it's fantasy. That's all I know. And I love this cover, and I want it in hardback, and I'm very sad that this does not exist anymore in hardback.
The hardbacks are really pretty.
Yeah.
I've been meaning to read that for so long, and everyone keeps saying, Gemma, you're really going to love it because you are really interested in like Egyptian mythology, and that has like a small part to play in it, and you're really going to love it. And then I'm like, okay, I'll buy it and leave it on my shelf for 7 years.
That's like reading it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm halfway there. I own it.
But I'm so scared.
It's so good. It's so good.
It does make me so nervous though when it's like a series that everyone really loves. Because that's me with like most series. Like Nevernight, Chloe from Persistent Bookworm told me that I was really gonna love Nevernight. I read the first one. I was like, yeah, you're right, I did love it. And then she bought me the rest of the series for my birthday and was like, I bought you my favorite series. And I'm like, oh my God, the pressure. Like, this is so much pressure. Like, what if I don't like it? Oh God. It's a lot. I'm not good. I am reading Battle Royale. I am a whole 30 pages into it. So just a little way to go.
How are you finding these sides of the writing, Gem?
Yeah, fine so far. There's a lot of names because they kind of tried to introduce you to the 42 children. There's a lot of names. But there is a handy little guide at the front with all the names. So at least I can refer back to that when I'm like, who is this person? But yeah, so I'm like, I had like plans where I was going to read it over this week. And that's why it's split into 5 days. So today should be day 4. I'm 30 pages in, so that's how well it's going. But I have not had a very good reading month either. Well, I say that. I've done okay. But Gothtober, I'm basically failing all the readathons. But I did read Frankenstein, so I'll take that as a win.
That is definitely a win.
If Hannah were here, she would tell you that you couldn't fail Gothtober. Because she always tells me that Gothtober is like, if you read, if you turn up, if you get a 12, you win.
Exactly.
That's right.
The spirit of Hannah is correct. There's no winning or losing in Gothtober. If you read 1 page of a book, you've participated.
Which honestly, like, that's kind of what readathons are in general, right? Like, they're supposed to get you to read. So if you read, you're nailing it. Good job. Like, if you read it all. But
I basically didn't read for like the first week and a half of the month. And now I'm like, oh, it's over.
Yeah. I just was doing my little like prompt shuffle, like moving stuff around. So I'm like, actually, I did a lot more than I thought because I moved things, which wouldn't be a big deal, except that one of the things I'm doing is Fablin. And if I don't read those books, I actually have to get like punished. So those are the ones that I was especially concerned with. But
you don't like a punishment.
Nope.
Yeah, a lot.
I'm going to be reading Woman Eating. I haven't started. I'll just be starting. But I thought it would make Gem happy.
So much. It's ridiculous.
It's about...
Here's my picture right here. It's
there we go. Match it.
Right. I absolutely love it.
I think it's about a vampire. I think it's actually a vampire. This was in debate earlier on. And she really likes Japanese human food and blood, and she's struggling with both cravings. That's all I know.
That sounds incredible. I might have to just get a copy just because of that description, because I'm intrigued immediately.
As soon as I saw it, I was like, ooh, literary fiction, but also vampires? Yes.
It's just, I don't want to say anything. I just want you to just enjoy it, but we'll discuss because I just love that book so
We
much.
shall discuss. Grey Warren. I'm too scared to read it.
I
Which
haven't
is
read
the last.
yet.
You haven't read what, sorry?
Impossible. Because I don't read series. Hi.
You
I
just-
buy them.
It's intimidating. I'm like waiting for my friend to read it so then she can spoil me for one thing. Because if
I
she
do
doesn't
that.
spoil me for that one thing and it happens and I'm unprepared, I won't survive. So I just
Yeah.
need survival.
I am going to go to Waterstones tomorrow and buy Grey Warren though. So,
Hmm.
you know, God
Again,
knows when I'll read it, but I'm 100% buying it.
one step closer to reading it. Again.
We're getting there.
Hi, Kelly.
Hello. I was about to ask, and then my question got answered because just from what you said, I was like, they have to be talking about Grey Warren.
We are still on talking about what we will be reading. Do you want to mention what you'll be reading? Quick introduction for yourself.
Sure. I'm probably going to start with Belladonna because I think I'm doing a buddy read of this. When I say think, I mean I've started. I don't know if my buddy has yet started, but I'm just cracking on because I'm enjoying it so much. So I'm going to try to get through my 50 pages of this, and then if I do, I might move on to Go Hex Yourself because Hannah, I'm 100% reading this because of Hannah.
Yeah, she enjoyed that one.
It's been on my like general TBR for a while, and she told me one thing, and I was like, okay, I will start this book tomorrow.
That's all you need to know. I think we lost Cara. I hope she's coming back. But shall we do a warm-up reading sprint? Everybody's got their current reads ready or whatever work they are sprinting with. And shall we read for 25 minutes to get started?
Yeah, sounds good.
Sure.
Okay. Let's start reading then. That's the end of our first reading sprint. How did it go for everyone?
I'm talking and I'm on mute. That's great. That's awesome. Anywho, it was good. I read 39 pages. This is very. I'm enjoying it because I like Jinn stories. I think that's like a really cool mythology, and I love Egyptian like myth and legend and all that sort of stuff. So I'm enjoying this. However, I'm tempted to listen to the audiobook as well because the typeface, the font is like a really strange font, and it's kind of making my eyes go funny. So I'm like, I might put on the audiobook to make it easier for my eyes. It's
It
good
is a
otherwise.
weird one. I did like it though. There's some fonts that I like, and I think I like that font. And I think there's another book with it, but I can't remember what the book is. And I was like, oh, I like this, but I can also understand how it's a bit jarring because it's not a usual font.
I think I'd be alright if I was in a room with better lighting.
Mm.
Because like I've got my ring light on because otherwise it would be way too dark in here, and I've got a lamp on and I have that light on, but it's kind of dark. So I think if I was downstairs with a lamp, it would be way easier.
That makes sense.
I did 10 pages. I'm really enjoying it so far. I feel like I've got past the kind of introduction, if that makes sense. And it's like, okay, you had 30 pages of introduction and now let's get into the murder. That's kind of how it feels already. So I'm enjoying that. And then I did do a quick update because me and Lisa are buddy reading Gersel, which is like series, a self-pub book, and I just updated her on something that I thought was funny in our buddy read pages.
Nice.
I read 5 pages, but I'm annotating it, so it's taking up me a lot more time. And I drew a doodle of Belladonna. Isn't that cute?
Oh.
Like that.
I did about like 20 or 23 pages, and also got my computer back online. So
Yeah.
very successful sprint for me. I mentioned before we went live that I'm in a different spot than I usually am to do live shows, so I might have spotty internet. So that'll be fun.
And I read 14 pages and had a phone call with my mom because I was not gonna not pick up on my mom.
Yeah.
So yeah. Next time I'll be more focused. Glad to hear it's good. I'm glad to hear that. Nice. Which book are you reading? I can't remember. But yeah, some books can be a bit more difficult. When it's a classic, I'm always reading slower as well. Even if it's very good, I just tend to read it slower.
Yeah. I've been reading The Divine Comedy for like 2 or 3 months now.
Just, take it easy at your own pace.
Taking it a little too easy.
I'm gonna try and read Les Mis with Abby next year, and I think we're very set on a couple of months, take our time bit by bit to get through that chunky book.
Yeah.
Whenever I hear about your and Abby's buddy reads, I'm always like, why are you doing this to yourself? This poor. Because I'm like, I could pick up like one of those really big classics. Because you did The Count of Monte Cristo, didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of me trying to buddy read that, I would be like, I'm stressed.
That one reads fast though. Like I actually think if you're intimidated by long classics, which I definitely still am too, that one is really gripping. So I feel like it doesn't feel as long as some of them do.
It did go faster, and at one point we were reading 1 chapter a day, and then we were like, we should read 2. Like we wanted to read more. So that was a pretty good one. I think War and Peace was slower.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was longer, was it? I think it was longer, but it also moved slower as a book.
Yeah, definitely. Especially those war parts.
Especially some of those war parts.
Yeah.
I'm
But
a
I
short classics girl. Okay, like picture of Dorian Gray. That's long enough for me.
Classics just intimidate me, full stop. Like, I was so... I put Frankenstein off for so long because I was so worried about it. And I ended up reading it. I had the physical book and I listened to the audiobook. The narrator for the audiobook was absolutely fantastic. And it made it feel like the language is a lot more accessible to me.
Yeah.
Because I don't read classics like hardly ever. I was kind of opening it. I was like, nah, I'm going to get the audiobook. I'm not going to make it. But that's made me like want to pick up more kind of classics and do it that way, because I think I will actually get more out of it that way. Dracula next.
Oh, Dracula is a fun one.
Get ready for the breakfast vlogs. Sorry, Dracula. all the breakfasts. You know, just get ready. That was my favorite thing about Dracula.
So much eating. Dracula, I read the last probably third on audio, and also it went so much faster. But I committed to collecting the Collins classics, like the black ones, because they look really nice together on the shelf. So I went through this thing where I was like, I'm going to start reading classics, and they're really cheap. So like every time I had a birthday or a Christmas, I just gave my mom like a picture of my shelf and said, get me any that are not these. So I have a bunch of them now. And then Dracula, Northanger Abbey was the first one that I started reading from the collection. And then I had the same experience with Dracula where I started reading it and I was just like, I have serious problems with formatting. Like, I need my font to be a certain size. I need like certain spacing. I need certain margins. And now I have all of these Collins classics and I really do not like the way they look inside. Like, I can't read them and I have so many now.
Oh no. No.
Yeah.
Luckily they're cheap, so like, I don't feel that bad, but
Yeah.
I think also some classics, like, they just don't want to make the book look as long as it is. And so they cram. And I'm just like, that doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help anyone.
It's the really thin pages. Like,
it's almost the opposite with Frankenstein though, because I was like, oh, that looks really long, and I was like, oh, this is all appendix and like.
I know. I do love the feeling. Sorry, Jem.
That's okay.
I was gonna say I do love the feeling of like, oh god, this is like a 500-page classic, and then you're like, actually, it's only 300. This is all notes and things I don't care about.
Only half the book.
I always had the argument with myself: am I going to read the introduction first or after I've read the book?
Stuff like, I hate that. I hate that there's this assumption from everyone writing those intros that you already know what's going to happen. Like, even for classics that I feel like are less well known, I'm like, why would you do that? Like, put it in an afterword and then I know to read it after.
Yeah, I stopped reading introductions after I read the introduction to The Shining, and it told me the ending, which is not the same ending as the film, which was my only knowledge of the book.
Why did people do that?
So I was like, okay, Stephen, I'm never reading any of your introductions again. Damn it, man.
That is so frustrating, because I get it, like with some classics that have been like turned into films, if it ends differently, like why would you even consider putting that in the introduction?
I remember just reading it and I got to the end of the introduction. I was like, I don't think I knew that, but I guess I do now. So I was like, no, I'm not reading any of those now.
But yeah, I think for classics as well, I think a great entryway point is the monster classics like Frankenstein, where they're not too long, like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde as well. The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells. Then, oh no, not the internet again.
She was going because she froze.
She'll be back. But yeah, they're not too long. most of them are written in still feeling accessible language for a classic, and it's just a nice entryway into classics.
Those are the ones I've read. Frankenstein, Dracula, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and Dorian Gray. Like, those are the ones that I've read and managed to get through and enjoyed.
Mhm.
Other than, like, I've read children's classics as well, but children's classics tend to be hella problematic. So,
Very-
you know,
I
you think
it's
they'd be an
definitely-
entryway, but they're not.
they're not great. They're
Mhm.
not great, and it hurts my heart every time.
I think reading Frankenstein this way though really has kind of opened me up to trying more of them. So like I had Frankenstein because I've always loved the Frankenstein story, even though I hadn't read the original. And I was kind of like, I'll probably just, I probably won't like it, but I'll give it a go. And now I'm like, okay, now I do want to try Dracula, and maybe then I'll try Jekyll and Hyde, and then maybe I'll try. I feel like horror classics is going to be surprisingly my jam out of all the classics.
Yes.
Shockingly.
The classic I really want to jump into, but I'm terrified of, is Paradise Lost, because there's been someone on on Hannah's Sprints on a Sunday, who's been
Pixie.
reading Paradise Lost.
Pixie.
Yeah, Pixie, and every time Pixie, like, they come on and talk about it on the comments, I'm like, everything you're saying is so interesting, and I really want to pick it up. But it's epic poetry, and like, that's intimidating saying it. Epic poetry, like, what? I'm not going to understand any of it.
Yeah, audiobooks can be a very good way into it. And I don't want to bring everything back to Shakespeare, but even though I haven't tried them, I've heard that the full cast Shakespeare plays via audiobook can be really helpful to people, just to hear lots of different voices and like visualize it a bit more how it would be on stage, which is nice.
I love
found
full cast
in my
audiobooks.
library.
Ah,
It's Tempest as a manga. So I got it. I was like, I'm going to give it a go. They had a couple of other ones, and I was like, well, if I'm going to read Shakespeare, it's probably going to be this way.
go for it. And let me know how it is, because I would do that too.
When I read Frankenstein as well, I messaged my friend and I was like, of all the adaptations that I've watched and read, I can now safely say that the most accurate adaptation is Junji Ito's manga. Didn't think I would be saying that, but it's very accurate to the story compared to like most of the movies. And I remember reading it, and because my knowledge of Frankenstein was the movies, when I read the manga, I was like, oh, he's taken some creative liberties. He's changed a few things. And I read the book and I was like, oh, he was right. Oh, sorry. I was like, he was perfectly correct.
Yeah, the films really go off storyline.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Oh, she's dead. Oh, no.
there's some love for Dorian Gray. I feel like a fake gothic classic lover because I have not read The Picture of Dorian Gray.
It's my favorite. I love it so much.
I'm sorry.
It's about a really vain man getting his comeuppance. Like, what? Like, how can you not, like? Oh, it's so good. It's just so good watching this man destroy himself. It's fantastic.
I feel
What's
like
really-
I'll get there, but I can only read one person's favorite at a time. Right now it's Jem's turn.
It's not my favorite ever. It's just like my favorite, like, classic that I've read so far. And I can also understand what Frida's saying about like not liking Dracula, because I think people go into Dracula expecting something that Dracula is not going to give you.
Yeah.
It's just Jonathan Harker being a thirsty bitch about Dracula. Like, go in thinking that, and you'll be fine. But like, it's not what you're expecting.
Yes. I like my brother was telling me about like somebody online said that the plot of Dracula sounds like somebody describing Dracula who's never read it, and that is exactly what it is. It's like absolutely bonkers, but I enjoyed it. Like,
Yeah, hard agree.
My
I
friend-
don't understand how people are taking these like iconic classics and then getting them completely wrong in like everyday society. So then when you read it, it's like a huge surprise still.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's like, because when I watched Frankenstein movies and then when I read the book, I was like, oh, the creation is over. It's like half a page.
Yeah.
The entire movie in all the adaptations. And I was like, we're just leaving it there. Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like it's one of my favorite kinds of science fiction where everything that happens is because science happens, but the author probably doesn't know enough science. So they're just like, quickly, let's do the sciencey bit and then let's get to the storytelling.
I
Yeah.
had an argument with my mother at a quiz once because she was asked. The question was like, "What's one of the earliest sci-fi books?" And I said, "Well, it's Frankenstein by Mary Shelley." And my mum was like, "No, that's not sci-fi. It's horror." And I went, "Mum, the doctor literally makes someone, reanimates them. Yes, it's horror, but there's some science involved in there somewhere." And we had a proper argument about it. And then when the quizmaster was like, "No, that's correct," I was like, "Yeah, Mum, I actually know what I'm talking about. Leave me alone. Of course it's science fiction." Like,
Yeah.
But even now, there's so much crossover between like sci-fi and horror. Like Alien is classed as sci-fi, but like is also a horror movie in any definition of what horror is. Like the two just work really well together.
Yeah.
Because you take science a little bit wrong, and it's like disaster central.
Yeah.
I actually just got in a Bond book club 2 books by this guy called Guy Morpus, and they're like his first 2 books, and they feel like sci-fi horror because one of them is like you can put 5 minds into one body and you share the body so that you live longer, and then one of the minds is murdered. And that's what the book is. I haven't read it, so I don't know. And then the other one is this woman's trying to solve a murder, but there's this like weird ability where this family has this ability where one time they can go back, they can rewind time 6 hours, and just as she's kind of solved the murder, somebody rewinds time and she has to figure it all out again and see if she can come to the same conclusion. And I was like, this guy sounds awesome. I was like, oh, get some other books because this is really my sort of thing. He only got those 2, and I was like, damn it. I mean, I should probably read those 2 first, but like, I already am like, just write more. I'll just buy them all.
Yeah.
I'll buy them all.
what are the names of those books? Because they sound really.
So the first one is called 5 Minds, and the second one is called. Oh, I'm so sorry, Ring Shout. I didn't mean to throw you. Black Lake Manor.
Immediately putting those on my to buy list.
They just sound so good. Very excited to read them.
I was just watching your video where you unboxed one of those. I was like, oh, that's the author. Got it.
The Black Lake Manor cover looks very pretty.
Yeah, 5 Minds is a nice cover as well.
Also, yes, Oscar Wilde's fairy tales are pretty good. I haven't seen any adaptations of them, but they were fun. Shall we do one more reading sprint? Well, we're going to do more than one more. We'll probably do 2 more. But if we sprint for 45 minutes?
Sounds good.
Sounds good. I'm sorry again about all the connectivity problems I'm having.
It's okay.
It doesn't normally happen. It's this weird spot I'm in.
Every time you disappear, I'm like, oh no.
I know. Well, and then it's like you have to be constantly like ready to go to like add the video back. So I'm sorry, that's annoying.
No. It's no problem. Always happy to add you back in.
Let my internet know that, please.
Okay, great. We're just on time to go until 1:15. See you then.
Yeah.
I just realized I completely forgot about the time for the sprint. I was like, oh yeah, we're sprinting till 1:15. And no, we're not.
I saw that and I was like, I feel like that's not the right number, but that's okay.
I mean, so we sprinted for an hour. That's good.
Good on us, yeah.
How did your longer than intended sprint go?
I was on my phone watching Facebook videos because I had to tell my mum that my mum is terribly middle class, so anyone who's British in this chat will understand this. But Waitrose are bringing back their coffee, and I had to let her know because she's been complaining about it ever since the pandemic hit. So I messaged mum to be like, "Have you seen Waitrose got the coffee back? Like, I bet you're happy." And then we're having a full blown conversation about that. So I was watching Facebook videos, and then I read 30 pages.
Nice. Coffee is important.
I was more trying to take the mick out of my mum, but then we started talking about it, and I was just like, when do I tell her I don't actually care? Because I don't go to Waitrose. I'm too poor for that.
Was that really an hour? That did not feel like an hour.
I
No.
thought we started at 9:30.
Oh my god.
At 9:30.
Wait, what? Or did I do the maths wrong?
Unidentified time sprint. That's okay.
I was so confused. It didn't feel like we were gone that long.
Okay, no. So we read for half an hour.
I think what happened is you put the sprint until 45 instead of adding 45 to the time. So I think we would have stopped at 15.
So what I was thinking of, like, we need to stop at 15 was correct.
Yeah.
So basically, I'm not good at maths. It's not my strong suit.
This is why I always put a timer on. I do not trust myself to get the time right.
This is a reading channel, not a math channel.
I was like, my whole concept of time is so out of the window. I've got no idea how long that was.
It didn't feel like an hour for me either. So I was like, really? Okay, well, you know what? Our next sprint, it's going to be 45 minutes. It really is.
I think I read about 30 pages. I'm really enjoying this. I'm not sure what that says about me as a person, but I'm really getting into the story now. There's still a lot of names, but I think I'm slowly starting to kind of understand who people are. So yeah, I'm enjoying it. And I don't know whether it's because I think this is a new translation. I don't know how new is new, but the translation seems to be very good. It's flowing very well.
I know when you got it, you wanted the manga version. So
I
do
did
you
think it was
think
the
it is? Wait, what?
I did think it was the manga, and I was like, "Wow, this is a chunky manga. That is a lot of words. There's no pictures." But actually, now I'm quite pleased because I think I would prefer to read it this way first and then try and hunt down a manga.
Oh, yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
A manga
if you would-
cover.
It does look, yeah.
Amazon tricked me. The bastards.
How about you, Kelly? How did it go?
I read about 15 pages and I went to have a shower because it's getting quite late. So I was like, then at least I can get into bed. And then I'm just ready as soon as I am done with sprints.
Yeah.
That's smart. Very smart. How about you, Cara?
I was only doing work stuff this last sprint, but I got a lot done. Also, obviously moved locations. The lighting is terrible, but the Wi-Fi is a lot better. So let's hope this is the last in our ongoing saga of my internet deciding I can't do anything. Yeah, I did get a lot done actually. So there's that.
That's good.
Work from home day. So
Love a good work from home day.
I do too.
I think I read 30 pages. My focus is just not here today. My brain is like, do anything but read.
Oh,
But
no.
I did read some, I did reread some paragraphs when I was like, I did not process what I read. But it's good. It's actually really good. There's a very sweet character, and I love a good, like, cinnamon roll,
Yeah.
genuinely nice person.
I also feel like I always read less on sprints that I'm hosting versus just like participating in. I don't know why, or if that's something that happens to other people, but maybe because there's part of my brain that's always like planning it, you know, or like monitoring things. But
I feel like clearly my brain is not in it today. Like, it's not paying attention to the words, it's not paying attention to numbers, it's just not on. But that is fine. I did feel like that a bit during my work day. I was like, I'm doing things, but I'm not here
yeah.
right now.
Yeah, I'm tempted to do accountability sprints tomorrow because I had to do that on Monday because I was literally just sitting there on my phone and I was like, I should probably do some work. So I put accountability. I did some accountability sprints after lunch and that really helped. So I'm tempted to do it tomorrow just to get through Friday.
Make it through to the end. I hope you have a good night. Also, just for anyone who is, well, just for you guys here on the sprint, if you do need to head off and sleep, especially people in different time zones, feel like that you can do it. Well done for being halfway through the book. I think I read about the same amount. Interesting. Depends on your pub day.
Yeah, I think it's the newer one. Hang on.
I also feel like it's interesting because although I see like classics often getting new translations, I don't see contemporary books or like more recently published books get new translations as much.
Yeah. I feel like this one is almost like I always think Battle Royale is older than it is because people talk about it like it's kind of a modern classic, you know, like that from like a few decades ago, but it's a lot newer than I always think it is.
I feel like part of it comes from how it did inspire.
That's what I was.
Hunger Games, and then
that's what I was thinking.
So then it's kind of got the classic tone to it of it's inspired a whole generation later of books, but it's not that old.
Yeah.
When did the film come out of Battle Royale? Because I know that there was Japanese. There was a film version of it, and I don't remember when that came out. Because that's why I think it's older. Is because there's a film adaptation of it already, and it inspired Hunger Games. But I didn't realize it was only translated in English in 2003. Like that seems not that long ago.
Yeah.
This is the new one. This is the 2014 translation.
It's saying the film came out in 2000.
2000, yeah.
Which is still pretty recent.
I always think of 2000 as being 10 years ago. It's not. It's not though. It's 22 years ago.
Yeah.
2000 was yesterday. What are you talking about? 19.
I know, weird.
I saw a TikTok the other day and this girl was like, for my fellow 2003 babies who are 19 this year. And I was like, excuse me? You're how old? I know the math checks out, but it doesn't.
It doesn't feel like it.
The thing that broke me was when someone was like, oh, bar staff now, if they check your ID, they've only got to check the first 2 digits of your year. Because if it's 19, you're old enough. And I was like, oh, God. Oh, I'm so old.
So our like ID numbers here start with the last 2 numbers of your birth year. And the thing that broke me was when I was like looking at CVs of people to hire, and I started getting CVs of people whose ID number started with 00, and I was like, oh my goodness, people born in 2000 are old enough to be employed.
No, they're not. They're babies.
You're a child.
I feel like we've talked about this before, but I will not be revealing my age right now. But just know that I was born before 2000. So That's it. That's all I'm gonna say. Full stop. But yeah, the original came out in 1999.
That
What-
still
what's-
seems quite new.
I was gonna ask which book
It's not
do you
as
think
old as
should.
Toy Story.
Sorry.
It's not as old as Toy Story. Toy Story
How
came
old
out in 97.
What?
Jurassic
Oh.
Park is older. That film came out in 93. Just full of the 90s knowledge.
I need a moment.
Sorry, am I ruining your life? I didn't mean
It's
to.
okay. No, I remember like when I remember when like Toy Story 3 came out and people were talking about like, oh, it's like especially emotional because like the little kids who saw Toy Story are now like graduating like Andy is, and I was just like, because I was like, I was.
Films are so strange. I always feel like they came out when I watched them, but that is not true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely not
But
true.
yeah. I was gonna ask what more recent book do you think should be turned into, like, should become a classic? Should be solidified as a classic?
That's a good question.
That's really tough. Hannah and I were having a conversation about this like a couple of days ago, weirdly, about like what makes it a classic. And like realistically, it's classic because it remained popular. So that's really hard. So I feel like the obvious, like I would say the Hunger Games, because people still talk about those now. And like the Percy Jackson series. Like I'm thinking of everything that's popular and has been popular for ages. And that's kind of where my brain goes. But they wouldn't necessarily be the things I would pick. But Hunger Games is great, so I would pick Hunger Games.
So does this mean, with that theory, that Colleen Hoover, It Ends With Us, is going to be a classic?
No.
I
Stop it.
hate that. I hate that, but like probably. Because just think, in like 100 years' time, like people are probably still going to be talking about Colleen Hoover and her messed up books. I've not read Colleen Hoover, but I've heard a lot of things about them, and
Yeah,
I've decided
same.
they are not for me in any
Yeah.
way, shape, or form.
And not
But
for
I
anyone.
yeah, but there are
I-
people for it. I'm not going to shit on people's like
That's
I
true,
read
that's
them,
true,
but I
that's true.
like they're for someone, and they're people clearly love them. But I do feel like unfortunately they will outlive everything.
I also think though, like a lot of classic, like what is considered a classic is just like what hangs around longer. But then there's also those classics that have been out of print for a while and come back. So there is hope. Like it's not just like what was moving a lot of copies, you know? One that I think quality and popularity that I think should become a classic is Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Bully. It's fantastic. I feel like I've talked about that book a lot lately, but that's one of those where like it was so hyped. Like I literally never heard somebody talk about it who didn't love it. And I was nervous because sometimes those are not books that I enjoy, but it was like even better than I thought it was going to be. Like it's just so smart. The fact that it's a debut just like blows my mind. And it's like such, I feel like it would be a great book to remind, you know, future students that like classics can also be interesting and like engaging stories. Like it doesn't have to be like an important book or a book that you enjoy reading. Like a lot of those books are the same books, and I feel like that's like a great one because it does so much. It's such an important story, but it's also incredibly engaging to read. Like I read several hundred pages at once when I was like, I'll just start this tonight. So it's so good. I hope you enjoy it. I loved it.
I read Firekeeper's Daughter a couple of months beginning of the year, and I'd started like dipping my toe into more like thrillery type books. It's not really a thriller, but like it's definitely got thriller elements to it.
Yeah.
So it was like one of the first ones I'd ever read. And I said to Hannah, it's really weird because I'm not hating this, and I thought I hated books like this. But I gotta say the writing style of that is done so well to keep you invested. So like
Yes.
it's a really interesting one. If you're not like big into thrillers, I definitely say give that one a go because it has more to it than just being a straight up thriller.
Yeah.
And it talks about some
Yeah.
really interesting things about like Native Americans and like tribes and stuff. It's super like interesting from that viewpoint too, and how people treat certain members of the community. And like for me, that was one of the things I was super interested in because it was done so well.
Yeah, like I'm not a mystery thriller person either. And I think part of that is because I feel like my perception of mystery thrillers is usually that they're more about the plot than characters. Not always, but like a lot of times. And I'm much more of a character person. And this one managed to be a super gripping mystery, but that also had such great character work. And like you were saying, like the themes and like the way it dealt with like different communities and like ideas of like justice. And it was just like, yeah, I also don't read a lot of mystery thrillers, and I'm like, this kind of like mystery thriller contemporary blend just like really, really works for me. She has another book coming out early next year. I am so excited.
If you like the thriller, but it's told in a very non-thriller traditional way with more character work, I definitely recommend My Sister, the Serial Killer.
I can't read that one. It would make me too mad. I've heard great things about it, but like I remember my name is Marines read it and she's like, this is so well written, but my sense of justice is dying. And I'm like, that's how I think I would feel about it.
It's so good. It's so
Uh,
good.
I do want to read something by the author though, if she writes other stuff.
I think I listened to an audiobook and then I was charity shopping with my friend and I found this for 50p.
That's pretty
And I was
good.
like, you're coming home with me.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like a lot of what I read would be considered classic material, if that makes sense. Like there's not a lot of things on my shelves that I'm like, yeah, this is something that is going to appeal to everyone. The only thing that I can think of that I feel will probably either be considered a classic or will be around for a long time and be discussed for a long time is something like The Hate You Give. Because I think
that was going to be my answer.
Yeah, that had such an impact when that came out. And I just think things like that are going to be the kind of ones that linger, rightfully so.
I feel like it'll be a new The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton, like young adult, tackling those tough subjects and just doing it incredibly well. But I feel like with manga, I feel like it kind of is a manga classic, like Death Note. It's the one that lots of people enter in with. If you don't know anything about manga, you'll probably still know about Death Note.
Yeah.
I feel like for manga, that's probably the classic.
Always a joy.
I also... Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, but also, like, Jem, you read a lot of Stephen King. I think he's going to stick around for a long time just because it's Stephen King. And, like, everyone has heard of Stephen King. Like, you don't have to like Stephen King.
Lizzie, I buy a lot. I buy a lot of Stephen King. And I made a challenge where I was going to read a Stephen King every month. And I did 3 of those. And that was it. But sure, I'm going to definitely get to them at some point.
Okay, but whenever I see your shelves, I always see the Stephen King shelf, you know, like, so for me, I'm like, from like what I've seen of your shelves, like I can definitely say as much as, you know, Stephen King is problematic in his own right, I feel like he'll be around when, you know.
Yeah. There's so
Everyone
much
else
out there.
I also feel like anytime an author's kind of span of work spans more than a generation's worth of time. So, like you were saying, Percy Jackson, like the first Percy Jackson book came out almost 20 years ago. So kids that were 10 then reading it in like 5 years' time, realistically, could have 10-year-old kids. And he's still writing books, and like 30-year-olds who were reading Percy Jackson 18 years ago are still reading Rick Riordan books. So they're going to pass those on to their kids. And like same thing with Stephen King. Like my mom read Stephen King. By the time I was old enough to read Stephen King, she was still reading Stephen King. So like we had Stephen King books in the house. So I feel like that, yeah, anytime even if it's an adult book, that someone ends up like things get passed on to kids, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But do you think that we might be killing some classics? Like, for example, like Twilight, I feel like it's definitely going to be a classic. Okay, no, this is a bad example, but like Hunger Games and then Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, lots of people didn't like, I'm generalizing, lots of people didn't like Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. And if we're going to generalize some more, like not that many people enjoyed Midnight Sun. So do you think sometimes by continuing on, they're like killing their chances of it being classicized?
It's
No.
also pretty easy to ignore other books, though,
Yeah.
you know, like, I mean, like, To Kill a Mockingbird is still, like, a classic, and a lot of people just pretend that other one didn't happen, which I think, like, also is kind of fair because she did not intend to publish that, which,
There's a
so,
lot of
like, I feel
debate
like,
actually wrote
yeah,
it.
the publication is questionable. What's that?
There's a lot of debate on whether she actually wrote it. Like,
Yeah,
some
it's
of
like,
it-
it's just a
might have
weird,
outlined it, and then someone else was like, "I'm just going to write it." So it's
Yeah.
all a bit weird. But yeah,
yeah. So,
I get that. Yeah, like I think as well, it's easy because in a way, because I was like, oh yeah, I might read the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, whatever it is, and then everyone was like, it's not worth it, and I thought, do you know what, I don't want to taint it. So there's a lot
Yeah.
of people that just went, I'm not going to read it, and they just have that original trilogy, and that's the thing that they talk about, and that's the thing that they think of, and I think, you know, I've got those on my shelves. I don't have the other one. So when Jensen's older, if I've still got them, he's going to read that, but he might not bother with the other one because I don't even have it. So he might think, oh, well, if mum didn't think that it was worth getting and she was like the original generation that read this, I probably won't bother. So in that way, kind of like might influence it to become just staying with the originals, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah, no, I
saying like
totally
he's going to be a reader. He is my child. It's working so far. He loves a library trip.
I think it's just easy to pretend that things don't exist. Like,
yeah.
you can literally just read things. Like, even if there's a sequel coming out, but you're not interested in it, like you say, like Nevernight, you just say it's just Nevernight. There's no sequel. So I don't think it's killing the chances at all, because like the internet exists and you hear quite a lot of stuff about books before you've even read it if you look for it. And I just think Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, I still have it on my TBR because I still intend to read it just to see if it's as bad as everyone thinks. But then I'm a masochist and I hated Twilight, but yet I still made it all the way through Midnight Sun. So, I mean, I don't think we can deny Twilight will become a classic because it kind of already is. Like,
Yeah.
you know, it's a staple on like reanimating vampires into like general fiction. Like, you look at how many popular vampire books are out now. Without Twilight, that probably wouldn't have had the kickoff as it did. So I don't know. I think you can just ignorance is bliss, right?
Yeah.
It's fabulous.
I also think there's some that like could be like specific classics, which I know is kind of an oxymoron because classic usually means that it's like widely applicable. But I'm thinking about like Mexican Gothic, which I know you just finished, Olivia Savannah. Like I can picture that one being taught in classes about horror, like decades from now, because it's such a good example of what it is while also doing more. And like I don't read basically any horror. That's one of the only horror books I've read. But like I think the way it uses like the tropes of the genre, but also like Gothic fiction, like it's such a smart book, and it's another one that like I think does a lot, but it's also a really engaging story. And it's like I can easily imagine like college classes, you know, on like the history of the horror genre, that being one of the books that you read and discuss, you know.
I was
I hope
thinking
so.
the same thing about Tender as the Flesh, because I was reading it and in my head I was just like, this feels like 1984, but now applicable to like present day. And it was just very trippy. And I can see it being studied, but I can't see it being a wider classic.
Yeah.
But I do think we still have specific classics. Like we have books that we consider Black classics, but they're a bit more modern than like Shakespeare. And then we have like, yeah, the monster classics, which is kind of a specification as well. So I do think we sometimes have those attributes.
I do think there are going to be like compendiums of like modern classic horror though, because I think there are so many that could be considered. Like Mexican Gothic is a really fantastic example because I totally agree with everything. Like I could see that being in a literary fiction class, like
Yeah.
in a heartbeat.
Which I
Like
love.
it's absolutely wonderful. But also like in the same vein, I'd say like Horrid could be could be a classic. It's like a proper ghost story, but it's very modern and very much like talks about family and family dynamic. And I feel like that could also be taught in like a university or whatever. I think it's really interesting looking at what makes it a classic, because classics don't necessarily have to be good or well written.
That's
Like
the
when you
truth.
look at children's classics, like we all were like, oh, don't bother with them. Well, why not? Because they're actually really crap. Like you look at modern day children's fiction versus classic children's fiction, like the world has grown by miles in what is good and what children should be looking and reading at. So like I think it's really interesting when you're trying to quantify what makes a classic, because when you look at classics now, not all of them are great. Not all of them are fantastic. Like you look at Jane Austen, she just took the piss of the world out of the world around her, and that's still fantastic because that still happens like now. So yeah, no, it's an interesting one.
Love this discussion. I feel like I saw on TikTok that there's a whole discussion going on right now about like classics versus contemporary and what people should be giving their time to, which is a debate that just comes around every now and again.
Yeah.
It's always very interesting to see different people's takes on it.
I know there's been that girl on TikTok that was like, you basically can't be a book talker if you don't read classics. And I was like,
Yeah, I heard about that. Yeah.
Seems unnecessary. Like, can't people just, the debate is, can't people just enjoy what they enjoy? And I think we've done so well, like the last few years, of really kind of breaking down the barriers around genres and around age ranges. Like we so many of us know now that it's okay to enjoy middle grade and YA, whether you're, 15 or 50. Like it really doesn't matter, as long as you're like enjoying it and getting something out of the story. And I just think like constantly putting up this, like, you are not a reader if you don't, or if you do this, it just I don't like it. Like just let people do what they enjoy and let people read how they want to read, like audiobooks, ebooks, physical books, whatever works for that person. They shouldn't be like being judged for how they consume it and what they're reading. It just bugs me.
And I think it also, like, it's okay for the place, like the cultural place of a book to change, because I do think there are some children's classics that could hold up or do hold up. A lot of them you'd have to discuss parts of them, which might not be a bad thing, but I mean, to like show the contrast to some of the books being written today. But it's also like, it's not like nobody's like taking a book away from you. If like, you should not be reading, to bring up To Kill a Mockingbird again. Like, I think there are things that book does well. I think it is worth reading. One of the things that I think it shows is like the way that like poverty intersects with race, and like the way that was manipulated to turn like poor white people against Black people. But that should not be the book that you read about race. Like, it's by a white woman. Like, don't make that like your Racism in America classic, and like you can still read To Kill a Mockingbird, but you should also be reading like James Baldwin and like Angie Thomas and like other authors. Like, I think people get defensive when people suggest that like that like you shouldn't put certain classics on like a pedestal that nobody else can touch. And it's like, nobody is saying you can't read this. Just like think about what you're reading as a whole and what you're using this book to represent,
I think that's always kind of where I go from it. It's like, I will never tell anyone not to read something, but it will always be like, just be aware that these issues are a thing.
Yeah,
like there's a wider context. Like, and just in general as well, like if there's problematic things, like J. Kristoff is highly, highly problematic as an author. And as long as like you're making people aware, because non-readers don't get caught up in what the author is like. Most people don't care what an author has said or done, because no one but people in the book community who are like hardcore readers give a shit enough to look into it. But I also think it's important, if you are putting stuff out onto the internet and talking about these books and authors, to make people aware of the context around it all. Like beloved books, like Book Talk loved, BookTube loved books. are by problematic authors. That's fine. It's always going to be problematic authors because there's still problems in the world. But as long as you're making people aware of that, then that's up to the person who's like watching your content if they pick it up or not. And like no one is going to like be angry at you for reading it. Like I don't like Twilight, but like people do, and that's fine. Like I'm not going to be like you're less of a reader than I do because you like this trashy vampire book. No, I just think it's a trashy vampire book, but like I'm never going to be like that's not real literature. Like, you know, you have some people who are like that. Like I have an uncle who taught classics at Cambridge University and like Greek classics, and every time I talk to him I just push his buttons about feminist retellings of Greek myths just to watch him squirm a little bit. I get myself in trouble at family gatherings because I'm that person who's like, you know, well actually
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's part of what some people are resisting is like when you talk about books online, I think there's a different responsibility there. Like choosing to reread something in the privacy of your own home, like that to me has a very different impact than continuing to promote something. Like even if you have a really small audience, like I have a small channel, but I still like there are books or authors that I don't choose to give extra advertising time to, you know, like that's just part of, I think, being in social media at all. And especially when you're like giving content that is like reviews and recommendations, like, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I think we all know the series. That was a massive and unfortunately, it turns out the author is a trash human.
Yeah.
It was my entire childhood was
Yeah.
spent reading those books and watching those movies, and I have very fond memories of those. So I'm not going to get rid of the books. I don't buy any what's it called? Official merchandise anymore. Don't buy any official merchandise anymore. I don't want it to go back to her. I won't go and see any movies. I won't buy like any other copies. But the copies that I do have, they're staying. I just put them in a place where in my videos they're not visible. And it's the same with another author who did some shit, but was in the middle of writing a series which I absolutely loved and was totally obsessed with the characters, and I'd already pre-ordered the book. So I haven't read it yet, but I've got it. It's on my shelf. I just don't talk about it. I just keep it out of the way. But I just think as long as you're kind of like aware of it and you're not saying, I'm not telling people to go and buy these books, but I've already bought them and I'm going to read them and enjoy them because the story itself is something that I really like. But I can do that whilst also acknowledging that the author did or is doing, in the case of She Who Must Not Be Named, just really stupidly horrible things for apparently no reason. Like just can't keep her mouth shut.
Yeah.
Just keep doubling down.
I will just say, can authors just get off Twitter? Can they please just like delete their Twitter accounts? Because there's been 2 of my favorite authors turned out to be trash human beings, and I will call them out. Philip Pullman, what the fuck are you doing? You're an old white man and you did an old white man thing. What are you doing on Twitter? Get off.
Yeah.
The other one was Margaret Atwood. I was really fucking disappointed by Margaret Atwood, and I was so angry, and I was like, you are a smart lady and you wrote a whole series about a dystopian world, and yet you are adding to the dystopian world that is happening around us. I am disappointed in you. So can people please take authors' Twitter passwords away from them, please? Because it's ruining my life.
Yeah.
I'm genuinely so glad that I don't go on Twitter very often because I managed to avoid quite a lot of all this, because I just think if I kept seeing it, it's just kind of kills my soul a little bit more every time. And I'm just like, oh, I can't believe there's still this kind of crap going on in the world.
I'm a nosy bitch though. So whenever anyone like subtweets that there's some drama around, I'm like, right, what happened? Who is it? Like, where is it going? Like, I have like a little bit of a fascination with it, especially when people don't at the person, because I'm like, but no one knows what we're talking about. Please tell me.
Well, and not just for nosiness, but if it's somebody that it's like, yeah, I don't think I do want to give my money to this person. It's like, who is the person? It's like, I don't want to. And I understand people being worried about like reprisals, you know, like especially if they're really well known. But it's like, who does it help to be like, I think we all know that blah 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 is coming, like is a bad sign or something, and it's like, no, we don't. What's going on? Like, who is the bad person?
But I think that's why
Let's
it's
don't
easier
know
with
how Twitter works properly. Tell us. Tell us who we're talking about.
But I do think it's easier with like classic authors, like when there's
Yes.
problematic stuff in it, because I'm like, well, they're dead. They didn't know any better. Like, this is what the world was when they were writing it. Like,
And they're also not continuing to harm people. So it's
Yeah.
like, my money is not like currently supporting somebody who does these things and says these things. You know, it's like, yep, you were a Victorian man who was also a racist, and you wrote some good books. I like, I will think
Yeah.
about how to engage with that, but I know at least that like none of the money is going to that person. None of it is going towards their worldview. Like,
Yeah. I
And
mean,
I
that's
feel like
to think about it, because someone asked her recently, it was like tweeted her, and was like, how do you sleep at night? And she's like, oh, I look at my royalty checks and then I'm sleep fine. And I'm like, that's such a trash response.
yeah.
Like, the hell?
I also think part of
She
it
could go
comes from
down in my estimation, but there we go. Just slip that
Mm.
in further.
But I think this is also very true that once the author is like a classic author, everything that they've done has been done.
Yeah.
They're not going to change. They're not going to evolve and like make some bad decisions or
Right.
whatever. Like you know what they've done and what they haven't done. And sometimes it can be difficult to contend with when
Yeah.
authors either change or just
Yeah. And it's hard too to even like define what, because it's such a case by case basis for like everybody, and depending on the author too. Like I remember Mara from Books Like Woe, she did one talking about classics and how there's kind of like 3 responses she can have. Sometimes she can like notice the, you know, problematic or harmful things in a classic, and there's like she can enjoy things around that, you know, like she'll mention it but she'll like enjoy the book overall or whatever. Sometimes she'll like notice the harmful things and it does affect her feelings on the story, but she can still kind of like, okay, I can see there's good here, there is something here that for her personally is like worth continuing for. And then there's those things where it's like, I cannot read around this. Like it just, you know, it doesn't it doesn't work. And it's like, it's so hard to predict which is gonna, like when I read Three Musketeers, when I reread it recently, there was so much misogyny and sexism to the point that I'm like, I cannot enjoy things around this, you know? Whereas like Count of Monte Cristo by the same author, there was some Orientalism and there was some racism and there was definitely some like period attitudes, but I could enjoy things around it. It's like, I don't know how to like articulate or yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. It's messy.
I think it's
It is-
interesting that point about like being able to enjoy things around it, or just like being kind of not being able to read past it. So like I'm a massive Tolkien stan. Like anyone who knows me knows that I love Tolkien. Yeah, there's some real problematic things in Tolkien's books. I will never shy away from that conversation because I'm like, no, yeah, for sure. Like there is racism, there is misogyny in it. He was very aware that he couldn't write women, so he stayed away from it. That is misogyny, and no matter how you look at it. But I can kind of read that with a separate mindset of that. Whereas when I reread Peter Pan, I could not get past it.
Yeah.
I couldn't ignore it because it was so abhorrent and in your face about the racism. Like it didn't like, I don't know, making it more palatable isn't what I mean, but it was so disgusting to read that I had to put it down. But like, I think it's being able to be self-aware enough to know what you can and cannot like abide. And Peter Pan for me was my limit. Like I just could not.
Yeah.
And
it
that was
also,
really upsetting because I liked Peter Pan as a kid. I loved the film. Like I grew up with it as a Disney classic, you know, like you grow up with it. But it's fucking horrible.
yeah.
But I guess
It
that's
also-
why like adaptations and that are so important, because like we were saying earlier with Frankenstein, the film adaptations, they really aren't focusing on the whole story. They're focusing on part of the story, but they're getting the fundamental theme of the book across. And I think that's why we're seeing so many like the almost like the rise of the retelling at the minute, is because people are taking books that are really well known. Everyone knows the story of Peter Pan. Everyone knows the story of like Pride and Prejudice and that. And they're kind of reworking them for a more modern audience and taking out maybe some things that are uncomfortable because we've moved forward, and they're making it like more palatable whilst maintaining the themes and the story. And that's probably why those books are considered like still classics, because even if you've not read that version, you know the story.
Yeah.
Mhm.
If that makes
Like
sense.
Cynthia Leidig Smith is a native author who did a Peter Pan retelling, and it was fantastic. It's called Sisters of the Neversea. Highly recommend it. Yeah, I think it is really exciting that we're seeing that kind of support. It's obviously still not enough, but like we're slowly starting to see more of that. And also going back to what you were saying, Lizzie, about like the like classic authors and like everything they've done has been done. And Olivia Savannah, you were talking about this too. I think also sometimes it can depend on how we saw like how their views developed, because like Tolkien is a great example, because like yes, there are definitely problematic things in his books and those should be talked about. People shouldn't feel like they're not allowed to notice those things because it's a classic. But I also think it can make a difference sometimes to know, like he and C.S. Lewis, for example, like they were men of their time in some of the ways that they wrote about issues, but also, you know, for their time, they were very, like they were some of the most outspoken opponents of like eugenics at a time when everybody was pretty much in favor of it. The only reason people really stopped being in favor of it is because Hitler was doing it. And nobody wanted to be like him. Like that's really why, like in the US especially, and I know they were like British authors, but like in the US especially, there wasn't like this great moral realization. It was just nobody wanted to be like him. And so I think sometimes knowing other like context for their beliefs can help. Like not that that excuses anything else. I'm not saying like, oh, you have to weigh up how much racism or anything. But I think like knowing that even though there are things that we rightly have problems with, it can be interesting to see how they change their opinions. Like there were even some like I know Arthur Conan Doyle's another one who like apparently later in his life he like publicly repudiated like some of his earlier statements. So like it's just, I don't know, it's like the of its time thing only goes so far, because like people in that time sometimes knew better too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think the thing that makes me most cross about like classics is what I was taught in a university. Like when I look back at the books I was reading for some modules at uni and some modules like at like secondary school or like A level, so like before uni, like that really pisses me off. Like Heart of Darkness is one that I had to read,
Cannot
which is really yikes. Like why are we still teaching that? There was another one, I can't remember the name of it because I hated it so much. It was like a diary of the slave who became like a lord or whatever, and like that was really kind of gross to read. And like now thinking about all the stuff we're taught in school, and I just am like, when is the curriculum going to change? Like, so we're actually studying things that are own voices and like not made as propaganda.
Mm.
It would be nice to see more modernized books in high schools. I obviously, it's been a while since I was in high school, so maybe there is, but it was like Mice and Men. Now, I like that book. I understand that it has issues, but I like that book, and it was probably one of the only things that I enjoyed in my English literature class because there were some choices. But let's be honest, probably not the book to pick for a bunch of like 16-year-olds and watching the film. I can think of better things that aren't as depressing.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
or even picking like, I mean, comparative analysis could be great. Like I was very old before I realized that Little Women was set during the American Civil War, because there are no Black people in it. Like, and they basically never mention like the father's at war, but like nobody ever talks about like which war or why it's being fought. And Bethany C. Morrow is a Black author who has a retelling that I'm very excited to read. So it's like, all right, if you're going to read Little Women, okay, fine. Also read this other book and talk about like how storytelling changes and how that's not a bad thing, and how like just like practicing practicing being able to notice problems and things you enjoy is like a skill that I think the whole world needs to work on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna interrupt here and be like, shall we do one more reading sprint?
We should.
We kind of devolved into discussion.
Olivia, you gave us a really important topic, and we all just started.
This is your fault.
We just started TED talking. So like, sorry, but not sorry.
I mean, I love debate and I love discussion. It's like one of my favorite things. And I love just putting out questions and being like, so what do you think about this? All the different opinions. But I'm also aware that I'm supposed to be doing reading sprints. Also, I'm not very focused. So I'm like, I can focus on a discussion more than I can focus on the words on the page. But yeah, shall we sprint for like half an hour as our final sprint and then close up?
Let's
Sounds
do
good.
it.
I'm going to say goodbye now because it's almost 11 and I do need to go to sleep.
Go for it. Have a good night.
Bye.
And yes, we are going to sprint for half an hour until 20 past. Yeah, all the way till 20 past. And that is the end of our last reading sprint, which I just finished part 1. So that was a
Nice.
perfect place to end. I read double of what I read in the first 2 sprints combined.
Wow.
How did it go for everyone else?
Good. I read 54 pages. I also had to go feed the cat, and now I've shut my door, and Blue keeps on scratching at my door and meowing. And I opened it for him. He didn't want to come in. He wants to drink from the sink. He's got this real thing about drinking from the tap at the moment. It's really, really annoying.
Fun.
I did about 26 pages. It's good.
Nice.
Good.
I feel like I don't have an exciting update because I was doing more work stuff, but I have been joined by a little friend. So he's been helping me. This is Peach.
Oh, nice. I see that some people joined in and some people left us, which is fine. I know it's late in the UK. This is our last sprint, I'm afraid. But
Oh no.
there will be more reading sprints this weekend. We have our slumber party, which will be happening here. It will be on my channel, but like Hannah's also co-hosting it with me. And then there will be last reading sprints on Hannah's channel on Sunday that are going all through the day. So you can just hop on at any time. They'll be reading and we can sprint our way through if you're trying to finish up a book before the end of the month or get started on next month.
Yeah.
But yes, I think this is where we're going to end over here. Anybody else got anything they want to add?
Yeah, if you haven't got a Gothtober hoodie yet, I was pointing at the wrong boob. Gothtober hoodie yet, find them on Waypoint Books because they're really cozy. And I was really cold at the beginning of the sprint, and now I've been wearing this hoodie all evening. I'm really freaking warm. So yeah, as we're going into the colder months, get yourself a good hoodie.
Mm-hmm. And
Lizzie
if
has
you're getting
personally tested them for you.
very good. And if you get yourself a Gothtober hoodie, you should also get yourself some Gothtober scented candles because you want to be warm and breathing in the nice scents, which you can do as well. So there are links to that in the description of all of our Gothtober videos, I'd like to say, but also check our Twitter because we will be plugging them again. But yes, that is...
Yes. The scented candles are very nice too.
I'm looking forward to them. But yes, that is the end of the sprint. I hope you all have good nights/days, depending on your time zone, and see you in the next one.
Bye.